Hi, welcome back to Learn Payload with Colin. Today we're going to be discussing user authentication, specifically using middleware to centralize the logic around restricting routes and pages to the logged in user. So for instance, a dashboard or an account page where somebody needs to change their profile settings, that kind of stuff. And then on the flip side, the logic for redirecting them to their account or dashboard if they're already logged in and they're accessing a page we don't want them on, like the login page if they're already logged in. So I believe in using middleware to centralize all of that logic. I don't like that redirect and user checking spread out throughout the app. I want it all in one place. There's a lot of reasons for that. Middleware is a little tricky in NextJS because of the fact that it runs what they say on the edge. It doesn't have access to native Node APIs. It uses the web API. There's a lot of web APIs, the request and response objects and stuff like that. So there are some limitations you need to be aware of in middleware, but for the most part, it's going to work just fine with Payload. And so that's why I'm choosing middleware. I like a thing called security by default, and instead of security as an afterthought. In a lot of examples in Payload, especially, you might see the authentication thought about after the fact, after they've built their app or whatever. You think, oh, now I'm going to include authentication. No, I'd rather have authentication be built in at the very start of a project. That way you don't have to think about it later on. It should be the default. And when I say default, I mean from the very start, every single route should be restricted to a logged in user. If your app is going to require login, I want to make sure that that's done with and taken care of at the very beginning, so that I don't have to worry about it later. I don't have to create a page and go and have to think to myself, oh, does this page require login? No, by default it will require login, and then it's only when I want a page not to require login that I make the change. So it's better to do it that way than the other way. And so that's what middleware is really good for. And so that's what we're going to work on today. It should go by fairly quickly, and let's look at the code. But real quick before I do that, if you're new here, my name is Colin Brown. I've been a web developer for 20 years, full stack. I do consulting, and I'm going to be using Payload CMS quite a bit in my consulting. And I'm also fairly new to Payload CMS, and I'm using this channel to document my own journey into learning Payload and incorporating it into my business. My first 100 video series is just me going through step by step, very small little topics in Payload, and just discussing them in like 10 to 15 minute videos, hopefully very, very quickly. They actually end up being a little bit longer than that, but I'm trying to squeeze them down. So we're on our 13th video out of 100. So we have a bit of ways to go, but I think you might get some education out of these, some value out of these. So make sure you subscribe and click that bell to get notified. We're going to try to do one of these every day, and we'll see you. We'll see you in the next video, but let's look at the code now. Okay. So if you're familiar with middleware within NextJS, it's really simple. You just create a file called middleware.ts. You're aware of that. And you can have a matcher. So you configure a matcher. And in this case, I'm telling NextJS that I want to match every route except for anything that has API in it, anything that has, you know, the Next.js folder, static, blah, 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 robots, all of that stuff. So it's basically, this is a sort of a blacklist for the middleware. And so now everything's going to get captured. All routes are going to be flowing through this middleware first. The request gets through the middleware first before it gets to the page. So I created a middleware for authentication. I like the pattern that Auth.js uses. This is not Auth.js. This is just Payload, but I kind of like the way they do it. You can just have it in one line and export it. So you can write this however you want, but I liked this pattern, so I went with it. So I have this auth folder here and a middleware.ts, and I provided a couple, just for the purposes of this demo, I provided 2 different ways to grab the user. So you can see, you can compare them and determine the trade-offs for each and which one you might prefer. So as you know, from here I'm exporting a function called withAuth and just renaming it to middleware. I could just call that middleware. But first I'm storing the response in case for the next response in case I need to just, that's like the default basically. All routes, if this doesn't get checked, just gets returned. The next basically pass through gets returned. So first I'm grabbing the user from a function I just created called parse user from endpoint. But before I do that, before I talk about that, I want to talk about this one, parse user from cookie, and why I chose this one instead. So all this does is grabs the cookies. So the request object comes in from the middleware, and cookies are part of the request. Server-side cookies are part of the request. I pass those in, and you can inspect the cookies from the request, and you can see there's one called Payload token, and it has a value. And if you're logged in, that value is your auth token that you can use in your REST APIs as a bearer token if you want. But so I say, oh, if there is no token, just return null. And then I if there is a token, then I decode that JWT using Jose. And so if there is a user coming out of that, then I can say, oh, then just return the user. And in that case, I'm saying for now, the only route that I'm locking down is any route that starts with /account. And then if there's not a user, if you're on /account and there is no user, then redirect to the home page. You can do this however you want. You can maybe redirect to the login page, or with whatever parameters you see fit, whatever works for your app. But you can imagine multiple routes here, or multiple conditional checks here, like if you have a dashboard or whatever. Or vice versa, you can say if path name starts with login and there is a user, well, then you can redirect to the home page, or maybe the account, or something that tells the user, hey, they're already logged in, or whatever you want to do. So you can do it both ways. You can check to see if there's a user and react to if there's a user, or you can react to if there's not a user, depending on your rules. So that's how you would do that through the cookie. The other way that I chose to do this which you may like. And there may be some trade-offs there, but so just like the parse user from cookie, I grab the cookie, the token from the cookie. But in this time, instead of decoding the token, the JWT, I actually pass the JWT as a bearer token in my authorization headers to the user's, the me endpoint, which it's available within Payload out of the box. Whatever your collection is, I mean, by default, your default auth collection is going to be users, but if you're not using that, just keep that in mind. I'll leave a link in the description for the documentation on this, but this me endpoint is already available by default out of the Payload app. And so now I'm just making a fetch request to a GET request to that endpoint using this bearer token. And then because I'm passing it along as the bearer, it authenticates me. This route becomes authenticated and then provides the result that I'm looking for. And the difference between the result of this user from the endpoint versus the result of the user from the JWT is that this user is a more accurate reflection of what's available in the database, because this actually does make a database call in order to grab the user. And that's kind of the trade-off that I was talking about. Whether that's worth it for you is up to you. And so for me, I like this better. It's going to make a request to the database on every single request. And for me, for now, that's the kind of my preferred approach. And but I may consider going back and then, coming up with a methodology for validating the JWT. But so these are two options for you for now. And so now let me show you how easy it is to lock down a particular route that you think you want the user to make sure the user's logged in. Now you don't have to worry about making sure to check the user as part within the page. It's already taken care of through the middleware. So let's create a new folder within our front end, and we'll just call it account. We'll create a group. You can set this up. You can organize this however you want, but I'm going to create, because I may have my own layout for the account pages, so I'm going to create a group, and then I'm just going to call this one account, and then maybe we'll do profile, and then page.tsx. Export a default function. And that's it. Add a little bit of styling. And then head on over to the browser. Let's make sure we're logged out, sorry. Oh, we are logged out. Good. So hit back. So I want this page, we are logged out, but I want this page to be available to logged in users only. And so we have that middleware. Here. And so now you can see I'm already logging out the user. The user's coming back as null because we're not logged in. So I want this to just redirect to the home page if we're not logged in. And I bet by the time I get back to the browser, it's already going to be redirected. Yep, and sure enough, we're already redirected after hot reload. And let's try to go back to account. /profile. And you can see it just redirects. So now let's log in. All right, we're logged back in, and now let's go back to the home page. You can see now if we go back to the code, you'll be able to see that we have we're console logging the user from the middleware. You can see here we're console logging it, and this is the user coming back from the API endpoint. And so now let's go to the website and then see if we can access our new account profile page. And there we have it. We have our profile page locked down, restricted to the user. And just real quick, the benefit to that, I have a page here that I've locked down, but I have no logic in my page to check to see if the user's logged in. None of my pages in here will ever have that anymore. It's all handled through middleware. Now I'll have some global components, I'll have some server-side components and some client-side stuff that will provide through providers, the client components that will have access to that user, so that you can modify the user, log the user out, and all of that stuff. But none of that code will be there for determining if they're logged in or not, and handling the redirects and all of that stuff. That's limited to the middleware. And so now my code on the front end is going to be much cleaner, in my opinion, and I don't have to worry about security, because now we have security by default. All right, that's what I wanted to go over today, and I really appreciate your time. We're working our way through these, and so yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot.